History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, so says Mark Twain. In this video, we're going to look through history to see exactly how new technologies will reach scale and adoption, and most importantly, how they build value. Using this information, we're going to give you an unfair advantage over those who aren't even paying attention to this, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about new technologies that build value. They build more value than last. So last week, if you didn't watch last week's video, make sure you go back and watch that. And we talked about something in our human psychology, normalcy bias, holds us back from taking advantage of these trends and new technologies, and how new technologies are really our best opportunity to make a lot of money. Now today we're going to talk about how new technologies create a lot of money. First, I recapped last week. I'm going to do it just real quick. The technology cycles, we've had 5 over the last 200 years. There's one basically every 50 years. And these aren't just technologies like a new gadget. I'm talking about a technological revolution, an entire shift. So in 1771, we went from the farm age to the industrial age.
There's not much here that will be sold, but there's a lot here that will be eaten.
People left the farms, went to the factories. In 1829, we had steam engines and railroads, and we started being able to transport and shift stuff around. 1875, we had steel and electricity. We could build bigger things, stronger things. Of course, electricity changed everything. 1908, we had the automobile. People could move around. People could, get around, transport stuff. And we had the introduction of the assembly line, which changed manufacturing. And then 1971, we had the introduction of the microprocessor, telecommunications, computers, and then into the internet age. And now, 50 years later brings us to today. We have a new technology cycle starting, and that is the blockchain technology. Now, each new technology that comes out, what it does is it stacks on top of the previous one. With each new technology, they basically take some of the old stuff and they improve it. So for example, the internet improved things, right? The internet improved the way we communicate, improved communication and commerce. So now instead of having to use a phone, I can video chat with somebody. Now instead of having to go down to the store, I can buy stuff online. But it also made a lot of new things. And what happens is each new technology cycle, as it builds on the technology of the past to create new things, it actually pulls value out. It takes that value from the markets that it disrupts. Some examples of this would be like the telephone. So the telephone took value away from cars. We all had to have cars so we could commute to work every day, but now with the telephone, we can just hop on the phone and talk over the phone. I don't have to drive somewhere. We had, TVs were put out first, and then the VCR came along. And the VCRs pulled value that were in the TV age because now people didn't have to watch commercials and movies and stuff like that. Talk about disrupting markets. That's the name of this channel, Market Disruptors, because we talk about disruptive technologies. We also talk about ways that you can go out and disrupt any kind of market, disrupt marketing, disrupt business, etc. So that's how that word came about. Now, like the online travel industry, right? So before the online travel industry, you had to use a travel broker, right? A travel agent. It wasn't possible for the average person to shop different airlines because they didn't have like a computer system to do that. So you had to go to a travel agent and they could shop across all the airlines and make your reservations for you. And that was a big industry. There was a lot of people doing that. But when the internet came out and gave us like Expedia and Priceline, now we can just book our own travel. We don't need the travel agents. And so it took the value that was there in that industry and it pulled it over. Today, Expedia is worth almost $20 billion and Priceline is worth almost $90 billion. So that's a brand new technology that was built on the new technology stack, and it pulled value from a market disrupted. And look, just between those two, over $100 billion. Big time value. Another one that we can look at is what the rideshare industry has done to the taxi and limo industry. Of course, I'm talking about Uber, I'm talking about Lyft, and we used to have to go and hail a yellow cab or call an expensive limo, and then all of a sudden Uber came out and then Lyft came out and they have disrupted those markets. The taxi industry has gone downhill big time. Uber now is valued at over $120 billion. Lyft is valued at about 15. They're about to go public. Airbnb, kind of the same thing. They've basically disrupted the hotel industry and they have about a $31 billion valuation right now. What also happens is that each new technology that gets introduced has a shorter and shorter adoption cycle. Part of the reason why that happens is that it builds on the foundation from the one before. Telephone took about 70 years to reach 80% adoption. To get through 80% of the households, 70 years. The internet only took about 15 years to reach the same amount of penetration because it was able to build on the telephone lines that were already there. When the telephone was introduced, they had to build telephone lines all across the country, which obviously took a long time. But the internet just used the existing lines, so it was able to scale much faster. I talked about TVs and VCRs, kind of the same thing. Color TVs took about 20 years to reach that amount of penetration, and VCRs came along, they did it in about half the time because the TVs were already there. It was easy just to go ahead and put the VCR right on top of the TV. Each technology pulls value, it gets bigger and pulls value from the previous one, and it scales faster to faster adoption. If you're liking this, give me some thumbs up on this video. If you don't like it, give me some thumbs down. Either way, I want to know. Leave some comments and let me know what you think. I love to discuss these things with you, especially when you tell me I got something wrong. So anyway, keep going. We talked about in the last video last week about this normalcy bias, and it prevents us from really believing in new technology. What happens is once we do start believing it, then we expect it to come along a lot faster than it does. And so like in the internet days, 2001, I started an e-commerce business. I wanted to sell stuff online and nobody would even sell stuff to me. They thought it was ridiculous, but at the same time, people were saying, oh, this internet thing will never work. You just have to give it time. And I hear the exact same thing with Bitcoin and blockchain technology going on today. It's too slow, it's too expensive, where can you even use it? No merchants use it, all these things. And it's just patience. New technologies take time. So let me just run you through a little bit of history just to put this into perspective for you. I'm gonna go through it quickly. So in 1969, the first internet message was sent. 1970, the internet protocol, TCP/IP, you might have heard of that. If you've set up your home router, you have like an IP address, your TCP. That's how the internet works. That internet protocol was in 1970. So the internet is a lot older than you think. 1970. 1980 was the first commercial ISP. That stands for an Internet Service Provider. 1980. 10 years later. 1990, the first website and server go live.
The system goes online on August 4th, 1997.
1995, 42% of US adults have never even heard of the internet. 25 years later, they've never even heard of the internet. 42% of adults. 21% said they were vague on the concept. 25 years later. 1995, Netscape launched their first IPO, and what Netscape did is that gave us a browser where the average person could actually go visit websites. Before the browser, it was very difficult to use the web. 1996, Hotmail launched, and email was really the first hot application, the first application that was used that really helped getting adoption or usage of the internet going. 1997, Google registered their domain name. 1998, 28 years later, only 20% of Americans were using the internet one time a week. By 1999, 41% of adults were using the internet to check the weather. That's what they were doing with it. By 2000, 30 years later, only 15% of Americans had ever purchased anything online. We didn't have broadband internet until 2003. It was really when the iPhone came out in 2007 to put the internet in everybody's hand that things really started to take off. So that was almost 40 years later. So think about that. Yeah, Bitcoin is 10 years old now. Most of the crypto assets are about 2 or 3 years old. That's really how old this revolution is. So you're looking at 2 to 3 years or up to 10 years, but the internet took 30 years, 40 years. Now, we do know that each new technology has a shorter and shorter adoption time frame, so I expect that we'll see massive improvements in at least half the time, if not more, but still, either way, it takes time. I always like to say I'm a student of history. If you watch my videos, you know I'm always talking about history and bringing that forward because history shows us the future. We know that there's new tech revolutions every 50 years, and we're 50 years away from the last one right now. We know that each new technology builds on the previous one. So we're using internet technology to launch the blockchain technology of today. We also know that it takes less and less time to reach adoption. So like I said, if the internet took 30, 40 years, we'll do it in half the time. We're at 10, so in another 5 years, we're gonna really see some massive improvements here. Question is, how much value is this going to create? So let's take a look. So where does Bitcoin, where do cryptocurrencies steal value? What markets are they disrupting today? So we have like new and emerging markets. There's 2 billion adults in the world that have no access to banks. 2 billion. So right off the bat, boom, new emerging markets, they already start using Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. As a matter of fact, people think there's no real world use case, but in other countries like Zimbabwe, Venezuela, they're using it right now. There's about $12 trillion in these new and emerging markets that's not being banked right now. So we'll see Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies pull a ton of value from that $12 trillion market. Then we have institutional investors. So we have all these institutional investors. As a matter of fact, as I'm recording this video today, was announced that 2 pension funds have decided to invest into cryptocurrency. So we have all these institutional investors that will start to diversify into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Today was like the first announcement, and that's a $70 trillion market. So they're not going to pull it all, but they're going to reach in and take a little bit of that 70 trillion out. Then we have offshore banking. So people want to park their money in Swiss banks or in the Bahamas or the Cayman Islands, and they do that because those laws are very friendly to make sure their bank accounts don't get seized. They don't have to be reported, things like that. Why do they put money there? They can't be seized, right? Mainly. They don't have to be reported, they can be anonymous, etc. Well, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies give you those exact same things. So it makes sense that if people are actively trying to put money offshore, they might also want to put money into Bitcoin and other private cryptocurrencies. Well, that market is $30 trillion. So I would imagine we're going to take a good chunk of that 30 trillion, bring it in. Currencies, we're talking about the dollar, the yuan, the euro, etc. All the currencies are about $80 trillion. Then we have new asset classes. So we have like ETFs, futures, derivatives, things like that. We have about 6 trillion there. The gold market, I did another video previous to this. We talked about the gold industry and we kind of compared how gold and Bitcoin have some of the same reasons why you might want to buy it or own it. And if the same reasons I'd want to buy gold, maybe the same reasons I'd want to buy Bitcoin, it makes sense that part of that 8 trillion might come over. Of course, we have tokenizing the world. What blockchain is doing is going to create a token economy. And so we're already starting to see the largest hotel in New York became tokenized. So now instead of buying shares of that hotel, I can buy tokens. We're going to see art tokenized. There's $700 trillion of assets there that will start moving in. So if you add all that up, even if it only captures 5 or 10% of each of those buckets, it shows up to be a really, really large number. The way to really profit and participate this is to understand how this works. That's really the key. Like anything, right? You have to understand how it works. And if we look at just the internet tech cycle, it's kind of the most recent one, so that's why a lot of people reference it like I do. If we look at that, from 1990 to 1995, really where you'd want to be investing at that time was in hardware. Routers and switches, companies like Intel or Cisco, right? 1995, I already talked about, we had the first IPO with Netscape. So from 1995 to 1998, it was really about browsers, search engines. You want to invest into Netscape, AOL, things like that. From 1998 to 2003, then things started shifting, and really we saw like search engines and platforms. So that was like Google, Amazon, things like that. From like 2003 to 2008, then we started seeing like e-commerce and SaaS, like software as a service. Then of course from 2008 on, then it was applications, right? So as the market moves, you need to change your investment strategy. And we're seeing the exact same thing with blockchain technology. So there's money like Bitcoin or Litecoin, and those are money assets, crypto assets. But then we have like smart contract platforms. So these are platform plays. We have privacy coins. We have identity technologies. We have storage options. We have gaming, all these different sectors. And just like with the internet, you need to know at different stages in the technology cycle, you have to be invested into different areas. So that's really the key. It's a lot to go into exactly how to figure this out, but I put together a free guide. You can download it at the link below. And basically, we're gonna go through what I believe are the best sectors of the market and how they relate to this. And we're gonna also talk about kind of, I gave you that high level view of all those markets that will be disrupted. We kind of dig into each one. We talk about how big they are, how much we think can get pulled over, etc. So download the guide, 6 legacy markets that are gonna be disrupted. We talk about the 5 best trends to be investing in right now, specific positions that you'd probably wanna consider for 2019, and then the exact steps that you can just take today. So it's just my free gift to you. Download it down below. And that's it. Hopefully you take advantage of that. This is going to be a huge, huge opportunity, and we're going to use this information to gain an unfair advantage to people that aren't paying attention to history like you are. So that's it. To your success, I'm out.